Well, it seems like most of the 60s, the Lakers were playing the Celtics, and they never could get by them. And that was a long and arduous period of time for a lot of these old Laker fans and players. That Bill Russell and the Celtic group that won a number of championships had their number. It seemed like every year they came to the finals. That rivalry was renewed in the 80s. Seems like every 20 years, and here it is now in the first decade of the 20th century. And this is our second time going back at them, and it's one that I think piques the interest of the fans of basketball.
You've observed it from a few different perspectives, player, coach, fan. What can you put your finger on what makes it so special?
I think the history from the 60s, it was frustrating for the players. I think the 68, 69 year, particularly when the Celtics finished fourth in their division and ended up winning the East, and the Lakers had Baylor, West, and Chamberlain, and they lost in the seventh game in their home court in a forum filled with balloons that were never dropped.
So how is this Lakers team different than the team 2 years ago that played the Celtics?
Well, we got some different personnel. Obviously, there's some changes that we've made. Obviously, Ron as a starter is different. Drew's back in the lineup. The last time we played him in the playoffs, he was recovering from an injury. So that's the foremost difference in our team. It's a team that's a little experienced now. We've won a championship and a little more under our belt as a basketball club.
Considering his health, what's your expectation for Andrew this series?
Well, I expect that he's going to come out and give us some really good minutes. It may not be heavy minutes. I think he'll give us some good minutes. He's got some effective things that he's done against the Celtics in the course of the year.
Do you care when you play in the finals, or is it a little more fun when it's this?
Say that again.
Do you care when you play in the finals, or is it a little more fun when it's this matchup?
You know, the final just bring into itself a whole different aspect of basketball because suddenly there's major focus. You know, the league takes over a lot of what we do, our practices and how the games are developed. We play at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock here in the West Coast. and the East Coast, we play at midnight or somewhere late in the morning. So, you know, it's just really different. It's you have to step into it as a player, and you have to embrace it. And you have to understand that it's not going to be the same old normal thing that goes on. So it's very different time of the year for the players. It really piques them.
Does that make having experienced this, how valuable is that then?
I think it's ultimately very valuable. I thought that we were a little green when we came into the playoffs in 2008. As a team, we played with Cal for 30-some games, part of a season. We lost Drew in the course of the season. We were young in a lot of other spots. And, this team's mature now and experienced.
Speaking of that, Coach, do you look at the way the guys deal with this rivalry and the tradition at all? Or, I mean, a lot of the guys are very low-key about it. It's like, well, whoever we got. In the old days, it was like, we bring on the Celtics. We want them badly. You as a coaching staff, do you like that? You don't like that? How do you look at that?
You know, I think, you have to like it. I mean, we know that, Cleveland had the best records in the East. The Celtics finished fourth or whatever in the East, and they played the best to come out of that Eastern Conference. But, we've looked at a variety of teams coming out of the East as possible opponents. And, I think the only thing that matters is it's a chance to avenge an uncomfortable feeling that some of these team members went through in Game 6 in Boston.
Phil, the Celtics won, I believe, 4 championships while you were playing, tail end of the Russell years and then the Havlicek, Collins years. What do you remember? Is there anything particular you remember about those teams?
Well, there's a different era there with the Joneses and Bill Russell, Sanders, and that crew of guys. Don Nelson was part of that. Some of those guys transformed or transmorphed into a team in the 70s with Collins as a center, Havlicek as a leadership role instead of a 6-man role, and Paul Silas coming over to join Charlie Scott and a variety of players that were extremely important to them. Jojo White, Don Chaney. And, you know, it was a little bit different than the machine that seemed to roll through the 60s, the team in the 70s. It got us at the tail end of our, you know, run in New York, in the middle of that decade, and, you know, had a couple championships late in Havlicek's career. And, you know, that was a team that played very hard and persevered. They weren't big, but they're pretty quick. They did a lot of good things. Rivalry, you know, hard to say who got the best of that rivalry when we were there. We won 3 times, they won a couple times in the playoffs, but it was very heated because a lot of New York kids go to Boston to college, and that turned into those rivalries that are in the fans, with the fans rather than on the floor a lot of times.
Coach, you mentioned this after Game 6, but how much of an actual difference does Ron make in this series against Boston just because
Huge.
of guarding Paul Pierce?
It's a huge difference for us. You know, he's gotten in foul trouble in one of the games he played against Boston. That could happen, and we anticipate that, you know, those are things that we'll have to deal with. But, you know, this is a matchup that's, you know, was difficult for us in the 08 series.
Coach, during the offseason, when you saw Paul Pierce and you told him, why don't you guys come out of the East so we can come out of the West, did you expect that to happen this soon?
Well, they don't have a lot of young players over there. I mean, you know, Ray Allen and Kevin are getting up there. You know, that's, you know, it's immediacy in the NBA. You know, you really don't know how long anything is going to last as far as a run. So, yeah, it was like, you know, see you back there.
What's key for Powell in preparing him for the kind of physicality he's going to face with Keith, KG, Perkins, and Sheed?
You know, I just think that he knows what he has to do. He has to be efficient. He has to not get knocked off the ball. He has to hold his ground in the post and not get run off it. And, you know, take advantage of the situation presented himself.
Coach, you talked about avenging that uncomfortable feeling some of your players. Does Kobe take it more personally than some of your other players?
You know, he devotes so much of his life to this game. I mean, you know, it really does take an inordinate amount of time in his daily life. It's not a pastime to him. This is a devotion, not just an application. And when you do that, when you throw yourself into it as deeply as he does, he's got to, you know, all those things count a little bit more.
Is it important for him to be recognized as the best player in the game?
You know, I can't answer that. For him, personally, I think it is. From his own standpoint, if that's what you're asking, I think he wants to be recognized as the best player today. I think he wants to show. He knows it's ephemeral, that this does not last.
Coach, physical play in the first 3 series, how are you going to can compare that to what you're going to get with the Celtics, and also defensively what they have to offer? Are they the best defensive team around right now?
Well, you know, we thought that you know, every team brought their own defensive you know, capabilities. We, you know, honored the Oklahoma defense. I thought they played really good defense. You know, they had us you know, at times scratching our heads, wondering how we're going to figure that out. You know, Phoenix obviously threw out a zone that made us have to think a little bit and have to do things that were differently. That, you know, cost us a game or two there where we thought we were going to work our way through that. But you know, this team obviously as a team plays the game the way it should be played. They play it as a team, both offensively and defensively, and that's the reason they do.
Phil, should Sasha's flagrant be rescinded, do you think? Or was that a just call?
Well, considering what happened in game number what was it, 5, where, you know, he came up from behind him and shoved him from behind, I think that has to go into account for what happened in game number 6. Obviously, the guy came up from his blind side in game number 5 and pushed him from behind. And I think he was anticipating something like that and just preparing himself for it. So I don't think those things, you know, can just be looked at individually from one game to the next.
Does what he did in terms of, you know, the mistake in judging time and place, does that have any impact on how you might use him in this series?
No, these are things that, you know, we've asked Sasha to understand over the course of years, you know. this is, you know, part of who Sasha is. We know that he likes to play hard, and he likes to be aggressive, and yet, you know, we know emotionally sometimes he gets involved in the game, and those are things that he's learning to temper, hopefully.
Did he enjoy his walk home from Phoenix?
He flew solo.